Hello everyone, welcome to the Scumdogs Kennel. I'm your host, Chris Williams, and in today's Cryptid Corner mini-episode, I have a couple of accounts with tall gray alien beings. One, an encounter with a pale crawler, and the other, three tall, pale alien beings invade this experiencer's home. Either way, we'll read the first article I have here. What are these pale man-like creatures? And read this encounter with a pale crawler, folks, and once again wonder if they are actually some sort of alien beings like the tall grays. Either way, let's continue by reading this brief blurb from it before getting into the whole account. I thought maybe it was a teenager doing a mime, but there was no one taking pictures, and this thing had an oddly pronounced spine and was completely hairless. Now, the witness thinks that what he read here could possibly have been an actual sign of the rake. The cryptid creature that basically, much like the Slender Man, has basically been, for the last 10 or 12 years, folks, been circling basically online. So maybe it was the rake, but either way, let's get into the full account now. I was walking late one night with my German Shepherd when I smelled an overwhelming stench of roadkill. I looked over into the woods near my home and saw a naked, pale white man-like creature crawling through the underbrush. It was on its hands, feet, and knees, about 3 inches above the ground. Now, he mentions that this thing smelled like roadkill, folks, so it smelled very bad. Much like with various Bigfoot accounts, folks, these creatures, at least in this story, folks, smelled horrible. So it makes me think that maybe, could this have been a Bigfoot encounter, folks? I mean, after all, this creature smelled very bad, but was hairless, and to him, it had an odd-looking spine. Now, what would happen if a Bigfoot got mange or some other disease that caused it to go bald, folks? Do you think it would look like this creature, folks? But from the sounds of it, it sounds like it was basically not as big as most Bigfoot accounts, folks. But then again, maybe this could have been a juvenile with some sort of disease, or maybe indeed this was a pale crawler account, folks. But then again, how do we know that pale crawlers aren't the same things as Bigfoot? And maybe Bigfoots come in a few varieties. One that doesn't really have fur or anything, folks. Either way, it's just an idea. But then again, with most accounts with pale crawlers, they mention that they have, either no faces or basically being, they look like tall gray aliens. But maybe there is a link anyway, folks. We just don't know. But enough talking about that. Let's get back to this article. I switched hands with my flashlight, which my dog's leash prevented me from shining in that direction. Immediately, in the 2 seconds it took to change hands and aim the light at this creature, it had moved 20 feet toward a tree. It was trying to hide behind it. It noticed my beam as I swung it towards it and quickly curled into a cannonball-like posture, balancing on its toes and the balls of its feet, hiding its face and holding perfectly still. That sounds, very animal-like to me, folks. Maybe this thing really was some sort of animal, but it sounds like like its body looked like it was very humanoid. So how do we basically square that with what we know about people? I mean, this could have been some insane man out in the woods, perhaps, but otherwise, I just don't see how this thing could have been anything that we would really understand. But then again, maybe it was just some lunatic, folks. But either way, once more, let's get back to this article. I felt an overwhelming urge to stop shining the light on it, fearing it would look up at me with glowing eyes and a strange face, so I continued on with my walk. I thought maybe it was a teenager doing a mime, but there was no one taking pictures, and this thing had an oddly pronounced spine and was completely hairless. I went home and searched the internet to see if, this was some new trend among kids, painting themselves white, shaving all their hair off, rolling around in roadkill, and crawling through the woods at night. I found a picture on YouTube of a rake that a hunter's camera had captured, which looked remarkably like this creature. I have no idea what it was, perhaps an underground dweller or a ghoul, or God knows what. I live in a country suburb of Tampa, Florida called Lithia. If you have any idea what this thing was, please let me know. T. Now, folks, I would have to say that this sounds very much like a classic pale crawler account, but usually these entities are described as basically being, 8 or 10 feet tall, folks, or even bigger, much like in some Bigfoot accounts. And usually they're described as basically being skinny and basically almost skeletal. But this thing sounds like it was rather, like a regular human here, folks. But then again, that's just me, folks. And remember, the witness himself probably wasn't all that close to it. And that makes me think that maybe, while he did get a good look at it, it could have been possibly a human, but I don't know. Either way, folks, let's read this note that came with this article too. The southwest area of Florida, Tampa, and the counties around it is ripe with cryptid sightings. What are your thoughts on the crawler humanoids? Indeed, folks, like the article asks, what are your thoughts on the pale crawlers as well as the other cryptids that have been seen down there in that area, like the skunk ape and alien encounters that people have had? So I have no doubt, folks, that maybe this pale crawler encounter could very well be another account of an alien being sighting. But then again, folks, that's just me. But from the sounds of this particular creature, folks, I wouldn't be surprised if it had some relationship to the rake, pale crawlers, or the Dover demon, because it sounds very similar to those entities, because all of those different creatures have a quality very similar to pale gray aliens, folks. Either way, very interesting. But let's move on to the next story, folks, which is titled, 3 Very Tall Alien Humanoids Manifest in Experiencer's Bedroom, and hear once again how this, witness encountered these alien beings, and, we'll discuss what they wanted, and perhaps maybe what they would do to him in the present as well in the future. So let's get into the story by reading this brief blurb from it once again. Their bodies were covered in a tight-fitting dark garment which was almost skin-like, without any seams or zippers. Their eyes were somewhat larger than those of humans, and their heads were completely hairless. This took place in El Tabo, Chile, February 2011, 2 o'clock a.m. or maybe 3 o'clock a.m. So, very interesting, folks. Let's get into this account and then we can discuss exactly what this witness saw. The experiencer, 27-year-old Paulina, was sleeping in her bedroom, which she shared with her younger sister, when suddenly, in the middle of the night, she was awakened by a powerful whitish light that entered the bedroom through the door. At the same time, she became totally paralyzed and is unable to move. She was now wide awake and could only move her eyes. Now, it sounds like this could possibly be maybe a case of sleep paralysis, folks. In fact, in these cases, folks, people all over the world have discussed seeing alien creatures, or in their own folklore, if they basically live in different countries, folks, sometimes they basically, they describe these ghostly apparitions. I mean, in Japan, when people experience sleep paralysis, they mention seeing these, ghost-like girls, much like they are described in various Japanese horror movies like The Ring and The Grudge. So, if this woman here was experiencing some sort of sleep paralysis, I have no doubt that she could basically have hallucinated this light and these alien beings, folks. But then again, this has also been basically stated in encounters with alien beings that they can literally paralyze you and do whatever they want with you. So, make of that what you will, folks. Skeptics will argue that she was hallucinating all of this, but people who basically, research UFOs and alien abductions will say that this woman had a good chance of basically encountering these beings, folks, because it corroborates other stories that they've heard before, as well as what I've heard before, folks. Either way, let's get back to this story. She now watched in horror as 3 very tall humanoid figures with thin bodies whose heads scraped the ceiling began to approach the bed where she and her sister slept. One of the beings stood by the headboard and gently touched the witness's forehead. At the same moment, the witness recalls seeing a bright light and hearing a sound resembling the popping of a balloon. After that happened, she lost all her memory. The next day, she heard neighbors talking about a sighting of a luminous object that was seen hovering low above the trees nearby. She said that the beings exuded a strange beauty and caused her to calm down. Their bodies were covered in a tight-fitting dark garment which was almost skin-like, without any seams or zippers. Their eyes were somewhat larger than those of humans, and their heads were completely hairless. Source: Freddie Alexis, San Diego, Chile, 2012, Albert S. Roselius. So, folks, we have these people to thank for this particular story. But, folks, like in other accounts, this story corroborates what people have said. In this story, though, we have these alien beings, tall grays, I think, folks, because they sound very much like the tall grays that have been described before, but they're wearing such tight-fitting suits that the witness could almost have sworn that it was their skin, which corroborates other stories of these beings wearing such outfits. And maybe in the original story we read through, folks, with the pale crawler, maybe it was an alien being, but it was wearing such a suit as well, but we can't be for sure. But either way, folks, she also mentions that they had a strange beauty to them, so that is something that has also been described in other alien encounters. Anyway, we're at the end, so please go subscribe to my YouTube channel. Read comics that are bad for you. Hit that like button for me. Make sure you're still subscribed. Leave some comments down below. Hit that bell for notifications. Hit the part of the bell that will give you all future notifications. And please, share this video out. I'm Chris Williams from the Scumdogs Kennel. Thank you all for joining me. I'll be back again tomorrow with another great video, so be sure to come back again then. Till next time, folks, I'll see you all again soon.